Recording in progress. Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Let's let's call our meeting to order. It looks like it's only Jenna and Alexandra that was online, right? Oh, no, and yeah, so, okay.
Yeah, and then we've got one more joining as well. Marissa is not on.
Yeah, perfect. I'll keep that open and keep an eye on it.
Yeah. Okay. So let's actually we haven't been reading the let's see, did we have it here? No. So we'll just start. The agenda. Anyone have any questions about the agenda or requests?
I don't know if this is a question about the agenda, but when you have these out and you're producing them for us in the slideshows, are those proprietary designs? And I mean, if we wanted to pull one out for a press release or something, are those available, or do we need to check with you or what?
Can you clarify which, what are you referring to?
I wanted to grab a graphic from one of your slideshows that you had in this public meeting. Do I need to get your permission?
I think that technically it's all public record, but if there's a specific graphic that you want to make sure we get like the best quality, like maybe just let us know which graphic you're looking for and we can make sure we're sharing it in the best format.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyway, so the agenda. Any questions? Or do I hear a motion to accept the agenda as it stands?
Move to accept.
Okay, second. Okay. Should we just move forward with our question? Alexandra, is there anything? Okay, great. Our discussion question, what's come up for you since last week? Besides other meetings, because I know that you guys were meeting. Planning Commission met. Didn't the climate? Yeah.
Maybe some tomato all the time.
What's that? You seem like you're thinking of it. The tree board meet this
We met last week.
okay.
Yeah.
Climate Action Committee talked about the events that we're planning to participate in. Anything else? We talked about what's happening here.
And we're we painted the wall on the climate hub. And
Okay.
it's a bright blue as a background, the pine over the tinting. And we're moving forward. Theoretically, we're gonna painting on. Printing. Don't write it in your calendar yet.
Let's stencil on the wall.
Yeah, it's a project, we're working with Urban Art, and they have a projector and they'll project it on the wall and then they do an outline of it. And then
Right.
they create a map and then people can, it's essentially a huge paint-by number. And then we're gonna get a bulletin board in the middle and the hangar has a touch screen. And we're looking at creating some ways the community can make it on a variety of things.
Okay. Sounds like fun.
And the fruit market opened, so that was pretty exciting. That's always a highlight. Yeah, the market.
Yeah, yeah. It kind of means it's spring, right?
Yeah.
And the new ice cream shop opened today.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's exciting for the most part. How about tree board? Maybe.
We met last week. We didn't really go over anything from here. We mostly talked about upcoming events, Arbor Day and Green Fair. We have some plans for tree board for tabling at Green Fair, but I am realizing if there is any, we have like some questions that we were planning to ask and have people put markers on a poster board. But if there are things related to this body of work that we want to be asking the community about or giving information about, that may be an opportunity. So,
I thought if we had, that crossed my mind too, and it might be that we can juice up the survey,
yeah.
Survey, you mean the survey?
their survey.
There,
I
okay.
got an email about that survey today. Did you guys send it out?
Okay, so we'll come back to that.
Sweet.
Yeah, totally. Planning Commission, But we discussed middle housing. And I kind of made some big decisions last night so that we can move forward with this, at least meeting the state law requirements. We'll move beyond that with looking at like how can we diversify, encourage affordability around middle housing in the future, but time being, we got what we needed to get done, I think. Yes, okay, okay. Okay. But that's like commission kind of work. Anything else personally that you want to share that's come up for you? A lot, I mean, a lot's happening, right?
We're starting to see firsthand the chaos and the impacts to federal funding.
What happened?
In the city, Drew mentioned.
Well, the government may shut down Saturday or it may not.
But-
The budget may be continued to next September or it may not.
But what?
There
what
may
are the
be
implications for
earmarks
the
or there may
first
not. Anything that Washington and Jayapal currently anticipate may or may not be there. And it's the uncertainty that kills. Because we're doing NEPA for Lakefront Park based on federal funding, and we're totally wasting our energy and time if that funding is not part of it. So it's frustrating, hour by hour.
And it changes even after that. I mean, well, that's what you mean, right? That's
Yeah.
hour by hour, but yeah. Yeah,
But
And then it goes back again.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes,
but mostly Lakefront Park to kind of summarize what we're seeing.
And Drew mentioned at the tree board that she can't get funding for one of the tree studies that we were, or tree, remember?
Yeah,
Forestry grants,
Yeah.
they were really, they
Either.
couldn't find recipients,
Exactly.
applicants, and now it's
Now it's gone.
I now know.
was that a federal grant or was that a state?
through US Forest.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Forest Service.
Yeah, that's. Yeah, I have a friend who lost his job at the that. Or the. He's a researcher, did important work for the. Veterans of America and. This was talked today.
my boss is 8 months into a 12-month fellowship at the Department of Education, so that's not going great.
Yeah,
One.
I was encouraged though, one of the things that has been on my mind, I was at a community meeting for another town that I'm involved with, and they were talking about their comprehensive plan and the 5-year plan to have a climate element. So I was encouraged that we are so ahead of the schedule. We're doing great. So,
We're already working on round 2 and 3.
right. Anyone out there would like to share anything? Yanni?
Nothing from me today.
Alexandra? You and your team?
Not much on our end. I want to make sure at some point we do an introduction for Marissa and then maybe Rebecca, I know you're online as an attendee. Mark, if you want to add Rebecca as a panelist. If you accept the panelist invitation, Rebecca, you can come in and be able to chat a bit more openly, but I just wanted to welcome you in.
Let's go ahead and do that.
Thanks, David. And then Marissa, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay? Great,
Yeah.
thanks for having me here today. My name is Marissa Milam. I'm a senior transportation planner at Fair and Piers. And we've been working with Cascadia on sort of the GHG element of this project. And we're specifically here today to talk about the vehicle miles traveled study that we're doing to support the GHG reduction sub-element. So we'll have hopefully lots of good productive discussion a bit later into the meeting. Thanks, Alexandra.
And Rebecca she's.
Decline.
That's 4 times, yeah, it's not gonna work. It's either automated or she's declining for a reason that we should probably respect. Either way, it's not coming through.
There's something in the chat.
Yeah,
She
that's
chat.
that. No,
That's all that.
that's that very subject.
Oh.
Okay,
I'll keep tracking.
sounds good. Okay, meeting minutes for February 12th. Did you all have an opportunity to review those?
I read them and I moved them.
And you, okay, and is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Okay, and all in agreement? Yeah, thank you. And we don't have comments. Do we have our next date meeting or someplace?
At the end, yeah.
At the end, yeah,
15th,
that's right.
yeah.
Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into new business. Alexandra. Do you want to go ahead and kick it off? Well, actually, before you do that, I just want to say, just thank you to your team for, bringing us all the information that you've done research on. And I know that you'll talk about this later, but for all of us, it's, there's not a lot of action items on our part tonight, other than listening and learning. Because everything that we're learning will impact or will have some credence to how we think about policy moving forward.
Okay, thanks, David. Awesome. Okay, so before Jenna and Marissa, before I turn it over to y'all for this item, I just wanted to build on David's comment and just kind of remind you all that throughout the life cycle of our time together as the climate policy advisory team, really what we're trying to do as the consultant team is do our best to bring you bite-sized chunks of this very big elephant. And just to remind you all that there are many different pieces that are feeding into the draft goals and policies for the climate element. That's ultimately what we're trying to work towards. And tonight we're bringing you another piece to that puzzle, which is an update, which you've heard a bit from Jenna previously, but we're excited to have her here again tonight and sharing an update to set the stage on the greenhouse gas inventory piece. And then we'll be introducing a new component to the greenhouse gas task, which is the vehicle miles traveled study and the travel market assessment. And Marissa is going to be speaking to that specifically in more detail. And I'm really glad she's here. And all of these things are feeding into what will ultimately become that climate element. So just underscoring what David shared, that tonight we're really trying to just build some of that understanding so that when we come back to you at our April and May meeting, you'll start to see how all these puzzle pieces are fitting together. But with that, I think, unless there are any questions about this kind of context setting stage, I'll turn it over, Jenna, to you for the greenhouse gas inventory. Any questions from the group on this? Okay, we'll have plenty of time for questions, and I'll turn it over to you, Jenna, and then you can decide if you want to take questions at the end of your presentation. And then for both Jenna and Marissa's presentation, we'll probably have about an hour 15 minutes for this agenda topic. So just keep that in the back of y'all's minds. All right, Jenna, over to you, and let me know when you want me to advance.
Yeah, you can go ahead and advance. So yeah, as Alexandra said, we do have about an hour and 15 minutes for this agenda item. My piece, we're trying to keep pretty brief because there's a lot of information that Marissa has for you. What I'm bringing to you is kind of old business because we have looked at the GHG inventory a couple times with this group, but it is relevant to kind of hear what's changed since the last time we spoke before diving into all the details with Marissa. So yeah, thank you, Alexandra. So in January, we really dove into the methodology for the community-wide inventory, and we also shared some preliminary results with this group. So now we're bringing you some more finalized results here, and this has now incorporated Marissa's vehicle miles traveled assessment, which now shows a decrease in transportation emissions, which is awesome. So you'll see here your highest emitters are still going to be transportation and buildings, but overall we are still seeing that downward trend that we were looking at last time. In the next slide, this is just more like a very detailed breakdown of how those emissions land. So in the previous slide, we were really just looking at those high-level sectors like the built environment, transportation, solid waste, refrigerants, and land use. So here you can see that broken out into each individual emission source that falls into each of these sectors. So overall, we are seeing a 14% decrease in emissions from 2019 to 2023. So that's awesome. Congratulations. And the emissions decrease is mainly driven by electricity, fuel oil, propane, on-road, aviation, and trees. Next, we'll get into the municipal inventory results, but I want to pause here if there are any questions about the community before we move on.
What drove the aviation drop? The aviation drop is huge. What?
Yeah,
what is it?
we talked a little bit about this last time, but mainly this aviation drop is due to there was a reduction in overall fuel consumption from SeaTac. And then also there's a passenger survey that SeaTac does that asks, where you're traveling from, and you get origin passengers from that. And so in 2019, the 2019 passenger survey showed that I think 82% of origin passengers reported being from King County. And then in the 2021-2022 one, that number dropped to 52%. So this is really due to a combination of a decrease in fuel consumption by SeaTac as a whole, but then also a decrease in passengers reporting being from King County.
I don't think we've seen tree loss before, have we?
We talked about it last time. It was so small that you couldn't even really see it on the graph. You'll see that that's, the lowest source. I guess compost is lower than that as well. But it's such a tiny sliver. I don't know, Alexander, if you want to go back to the overall slide, but you'll see like that orange at the top. It's such a small sliver that you barely see it. So it was in the last figure I showed you all last time. But yeah, it is very, very small. So it is tough to see whenever we're looking at it in this way.
This is a particular area of particular interest, I would say, to people in like Forest Park, is the issue of tree loss. So wait, what this is saying is that in 2019, 727 trees were lost.
No, what it's saying is that either from any type of forest change, that's the resulting emissions. So that's 727 metric tons of CO2e, not necessarily number of trees.
Okay, oh, yeah, obviously, thank you, yeah.
Yeah, and I will say, we're not looking at it right now, but it will be explored in the GHG report. There's a much larger sequestration benefit from trees, so that it comes from maintaining your tree canopy, but also if you're growing that tree canopy. And I think that number off the top of my head was something like 5,000 metric tons of CO2e that were being sequestered. But we can't net those two in reporting. You have to report emissions and sequestration separately. Great. Any other questions here before I share municipal?
Let me dumb question as usual. But for the tree loss, so if that's emissions, greenhouse gas emissions,
Mm-hmm.
if you have tree loss, you have a decrease of emissions due to tree loss. Doesn't that mean an increase of trees or something? Your emissions go down. Does that reflect
So really,
trees?
what it's saying is, so what the analysis looks at is changes in land use, right? So it'll look at various things, like forest to cropland, forest to grassland, things like that, forest to development or something like that. And it, kind of shows the number of acres lost in that and the emissions that resulted from that loss of trees.
The emissions has decreased at least from
Yeah.
2020.
Because
Yeah, so it's showing you're losing less.
So
That's
fewer
good. I mean,
acres.
they're better land
Yeah.
practices. Okay, just
But
making
it
sure,
could be that the trees are just growing taller.
it's not just trees, it's a
Well,
whole,
that-
it's green things.
Yeah, but that wouldn't be it, because well, I know, I'm not sure we. It's an issue that we could talk about that later, yeah.
it's not just tree loss.
So I think what Jenna was saying is that it's from a forested piece of land that is taken down for development and then the emissions that causes.
Mhm.
Ah,
Like it's that tree is no longer sequestering carbon, and whenever you like cut down a tree, it releases the carbon that has been stored. Awesome. Any other questions? And this will kind of be detailed a little bit more in the report that we'll be sharing here in the next month or so. So be on the lookout for that, and hopefully that'll help answer some of those questions as well. So we also are sharing the initial results of the 2023 municipal inventory today. So we'll see that the city of Lake Forest Park contributed 247 metric tons of CO2e, with the largest contributor here being from vehicle fleet, which is a pretty standard thing to see here. I do want to note that there were a few emission sources that were left out due to lack of data availability, and that included business travel, employee commute, fuel oil, and propane. And then additionally, city facilities reported being all electric, therefore no natural gas data was collected. So this is kind of the the city of Lake Forest Park's baseline inventory. So there will also be a brief part of the report about this as well. And it will be recommending things to help bolster this inventory in the future, recommending ways maybe they could collect data around business travel and employee commute and fuel oil and propane, so that can be included in a future inventory with perhaps an updated baseline. Any questions there before I pass it off to Marissa for the deep dive into the travel market and vehicle miles assessment?
Refrigerants coming from in that, that seems
Okay.
high. Or I don't
we're-
know what it is.
Yeah, so refrigerants, that's just going to be, HFCs and things like that that are used to refill refrigeration equipment. So refrigerants, this comes from mobile and stationary. So both refrigerants that are used to refill or charge a vehicle's air conditioning, but also, the building you're sitting in right now, air conditioning could have maintenance, a refrigerator could have maintenance, any type of cooling equipment could have refrigerant leakage that then has to be refilled. And so the emissions from refrigerants are assumed to come from the refrigerants that are leaked. It does show 56, which, that's 23% of the inventory, but whenever we're looking at 23% of 247, that's not like a huge number. So I wouldn't call this a lot by any means, but I will say that refrigerants do have a very, very, very high global warming potential. So, for every 1 pound of a certain refrigerant, that could be equivalent to 2,400 pounds of carbon dioxide equivalency.
Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. If there are no more questions, I'll pass it off to Marissa, and I'll probably hop off if that's okay with you guys, but definitely want to make sure you guys don't have any more questions for me before I get out of here.
Maybe just a quick note before you hop, Jenna, a note to the group that you all can expect to see a report, a GHD report that like summarize all of this information that we've been bringing to you in the next month or so. So we'll be planning to send that out by email. And it may or may not sync up perfectly with our next CPAT meeting, but we'll keep you posted on when that's available for your review.
Is it useful to compare this data with other cities? Comparable to Lake Forest Park for all purposes, or?
Yeah, I think a good way to do that a lot of times is to look at compare per capita emissions. Particularly, I would probably aim to do that with other jurisdictions within King County. I know King County is wrapping up their K4C inventories, so there might be a fuller report that looks at all those per capita emissions. But yeah, if you look at it per capita, it really normalizes that data to see kind of like where you are in comparison to neighboring jurisdictions.
Any other questions? Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. Have a good night.
Awesome. Thanks, Jenna. Okay, Marissa, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks so much. We have a lot of content to cover today, talking about the vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, study and the results of our travel market assessment. So I'll try and move quickly through the slides, but please interrupt or raise your hand, put a question in the chat if you do have questions. I know this is a lot of very technical data, so I want to make sure that we're answering questions as they come up. Next slide. So what I want to talk about tonight is just sort of quickly review what the commerce guidelines are for the VMT reduction portion of the greenhouse gas sub-element, to sort of set the stage for what the ultimate outcomes of this work are going to be and what we're asking for your feedback on. Tonight, we're going to be presenting the results of the travel market assessment, which are going to inform the potential VMT reduction strategies and policies that we may incorporate into the climate element. There's a couple of discussion questions that we have scattered throughout some of the slide deck here. So we really want to sort of share this initial information on the travel market assessment really as like background, sort of that context setting piece. And where we're going to specifically be asking your feedback tonight is on the potential VMT reduction strategies. Next slide. Okay, so what are the steps that we're taking here? And this is from the commerce guidelines. So for VMT reduction, the ultimate goal of the effort is to set VMT per capita reduction targets and develop strategies to achieve those targets that then get implemented throughout all of your comprehensive planning processes. The initial steps required to do that, we've made some great progress over the last couple of months. The first one being focusing on the sort of VMT inventory piece, which Jenna shared in her presentation, has been incorporated into the GHG inventory. I'll talk a little bit about how we've sort of customized the data that we got from PSRC for Lake Forest Park to account for some post-COVID travel trends. And then the bulk of the analysis is really on this travel market assessment and strategy evaluation, which is really trying to inform and sort of paint this picture of the transportation profile of the city to help us understand who's traveling, by what mode, for what types of trip purposes, so that we can actually choose really effective VMT reduction strategies based off of the type of travel that's happening in the city. So ultimately all of that will be wrapped together with the target setting, the strategy, policy development, and integrated into the climate element. Any questions on the required steps? All right, moving on. So VMT inventory, you already saw these numbers in Jenna's charts, but just wanted to sort of recap the methodology that went into this. So PSRC provides estimated VMT from their travel demand models. That is sort of specific to the city of Lake Forest Park. However, their travel demand models are not calibrated to a post-COVID base year. So all of their models right now use a 2018 base year and are just sort of interpolated to some of these other kind of current year estimates. And so what we wanted to do was actually reflect the travel that's happening on the ground today in the city. And so we purchased big data or streetlight data for each of these 3 horizon years to understand the amount and type of vehicle travel happening in the city, and to basically create like a calibration factor for the data that we got from PSRC. which accounts for the change in trips that we're seeing as a result of COVID. So I won't dive too much into the results here, but as you can see from the tables previously as well, on-road transportation emissions are decreasing that trend line since 2019. I'll get more into this talking about the VMT results, but I think a really interesting takeaway from this reduction is that what we're seeing out of the data sources is that vehicle trips are actually continuing to increase in the city, which is maybe counterintuitive to the results you're seeing here. But the big reductions are actually coming from the increase in electric vehicles within the overall fleet across the city. So that's where we're starting to see just over the last about 4 or 5 years, the amount of electric vehicles has increased from about 1 to 2% in some communities to almost 4% in most areas in King County. So that's starting to show up in our GHG inventory results. All right, moving through here, I'll start to go over the travel market summary. So on the next slide, I'll just show some initial, again, setting the stage, what is going on in Lake Forest Park. A big piece of this VMT study and the travel market is really just understanding the local context of the community and understanding what these current travel patterns, vehicle ownership rates are. So a lot of this we've incorporated into the travel market assessment itself, which I'll show in a couple slides. But just some more sort of interesting pieces that we're using as a part of the analysis here. One of the things we're looking at is some census data for employee travel flows. This data helps us understand sort of for people who are living in the city, where they're working, and for people who are working in the city, where they're living, because that type of commute in and out of the city can be a really big driver of VMT. And so from the census data from 2022, 98% of the workforce living within the city works outside of the city. And so obviously it's hard for people to walk or bike or take transit in a lot of cases when they have longer commutes that stretch outside the city boundaries. Vehicle access is pretty high within the city, which is probably not that surprising. Almost 100%, like 99% of households have one or more vehicles available to them. And looking at the commute to work mode share, again, for looking at people who live within the city itself, almost 29-30% are reporting work from home. And the vast majority of those who are working outside of the home are getting there by their personal vehicle. Next slide.
Can you clarify the source on the work from home? So it says 2019 to 2023. I feel like in that period, working from home changed a lot. Is that an average over multiple years? Is that a point in time, sometime in that span?
Yeah, good question. This is the census sort of rolling 5-year surveys. They have a much better sample size than the 1-year data, which is pretty messy. So this is mostly post-COVID data.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question. All right, next slide. We will get more into transit, I think later on we talk more about the VMT reduction strategies, but we wanted to paint an initial picture of a couple different things. Obviously, there's a big change in transit ridership as a result of COVID. Over the last 5 years, King County Metro system-wide ridership has decreased about 35% from its peak in early 2019. But ridership within Lake Forest Park itself has decreased a little bit over 50%. So a larger decrease compared to the rest of the county, which is not that surprising. A lot of King County Metro's reports have shown that the biggest losses have been in those more suburban areas where people are maybe traveling less by transit to commute to downtown Seattle, for example. However, transit is a really big piece of VMT work, especially as
We've lost bus routes.
Mm-hmm.
Like a significant loss of bus routes in those years.
Yes, and so, oh, sorry, is there a question?
Yes. Not really a question, but a comment about loss of bus route service as opposed to same service, less riders.
Yes, and so that's what we're showing in sort of the table on the screen here. But we've looked at a couple different things for transit. We've looked at 2019 sort of speed and reliability and accessibility using sort of the Lake Forest Park Town Center as our main access point. And then we looked at the same thing in 2024. And we have the same information that we won't talk about today, but for 2030, sort of post-stride BRT implementation. And the results of this show that the number of jobs accessible by transit from that Lake Forest Park Town Center, it's relatively consistent as compared to 2019. A big piece of that, though, is obviously the restructure and sort of the change in the bus routes themselves in providing that more structured access to light rail rather than that sort of what we call a one seat or no transfer connection to some of the key other destinations outside of the city. And so that's something that we're seeing in some other sort of areas across King County as well, is that even if the sort of total travel time is relatively similar between either your previous bus one seat connection to now to your bus to light rail trip, just having to sort of make that transfer in order to make your trips is definitely challenging for a lot of people. And so that's where we start to see some of that transit ridership loss, as well as obviously the restructure has resulted in a decrease in service hours overall compared to 2019. The obviously overall transit service picture is not as good as it was pre-COVID.
So,
Oh, go ahead.
does this chart say that in 15 minutes from downtown Lake Forest Park, in 2019 there were 2,000 jobs, and in 24 there was 1,000 jobs? What? I'm sorry, no, I don't know how to read that chart.
Yeah, that's what this chart is saying, is that within a 15-minute trip on a bus, or by the transit available at that time, you could reach about 2,000 jobs in 2019. In 2024, you could reach about 1,000.
That reflects the change in the bus routes and all that, right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah, so this is less land use related and more about the transit accessibility.
do you have a sense of what light rail change, how light rail has affected? It seems like people will be using light rail to get to work.
Yeah, light rail ridership has actually increased since pre-COVID. It's a little bit funky because obviously there's been system expansions and changes during that time. But really the bulk of the loss in transit ridership we've seen has come from the bus system. There's a lot of different theories about that, and I could go on for a very long time. But that's the short answer.
It's shoreline, we just opened the shoreline one like last year, so you'd think that that would be helpful. Or hopefully would be helpful, and there's an increase in transit time 60 minutes away. Is that related to light rail's usage or?
Yeah, the 60-minute travel shed is almost certainly attributed to the new light rail coverage. Yeah, probably the 45-minute increase as well, although they're relatively similar. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this was sort of a bit of the background to the travel market assessment, but what we're going to be covering in the next couple slides is sort of the results of this travel market, which is essentially, like I mentioned, this study conducted to understand the travel behavior of people traveling both to, from, and then within a jurisdiction. What I mean by travel behavior is essentially the number of vehicle trips, vehicle trip length, trip purpose, all of these things that ultimately result in VMT, because VMT is just the calculation of the number of vehicle trips times trip length. And so by breaking out VMT by sort of trip purpose and by market or like residents and employees, this is where we can start to really get a lot of really useful information about what types of VMT strategies are actually going to be applicable. So this involves a lot of different data sources and data calibration. I mentioned that we purchased big data for this effort. We purchased streetlight data that was used in that calibration of the VMT inventory. We used a lot of census information, the PSRC household travel survey, and then these sort of additional profile pieces on transit ridership and accessibility, EV, fleet registration, that sort of thing. Next slide. So that's what a travel market assessment is, but the next question is why. So I think there's maybe animations, you just click through a couple of these. So the travel market assessment, again, it's about breaking down the total VMT that is attributed to the city into a couple of very key categories. The first one we just generally call work trips. These are trips that are to and from a workplace. This is important because it includes both people living in Lake Forest Park and commuting outside of the city, and people working in Lake Forest Park and commuting into the city. So both of those travel market groups are included in this work trip category.
I have a question on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Does it also include people who neither live nor work in Lake Forest Park but drive through it?
Great question. The travel market assessment does not. And this is, I can talk a lot more about the different types of VMT measurements if you'd like, but for the purposes of VMT reduction strategies, that sort of what we call pass-through VMT is not very helpful because it's very hard to influence people who are traveling through your community, right? If they're not stopping there, they have nothing to do with the city, they're probably on 522. You can't really control anything about that travel market. So I've worked with some communities where they've wanted to quantify that piece, acknowledge it, and then kind of move on. But for this purpose of developing actual implementable strategies, it's not something that we focus on.
Thanks for
Any other
clarifying.
questions about that? Yeah, good question. Okay, so then just the other two main categories that you'll see beyond work trips is sort of the last bucket of non-work resident trips. So these are trips that are made by anyone living within the city, traveling for any purpose that's just not their commute trip, since that's captured under the first bucket. And then the last bucket is this sort of like the remaining piece. It's non-work visitor trips. So it's people who don't live or work in the city, but are traveling either to or from the city for usually, retail, shopping, eating, visiting friends, those types of non-work activities. The other thing I'll clarify, because you'll see it on a couple of the next slides, is that the trips are broken out by start and end location. So you'll see this II, IX, XI nomenclature throughout the presentation. And really all that we're doing is breaking them into kind of two main buckets. The internal trips, the II, which start and end within the city, and then the IX or XI, which is travel that either has one trip end within the city. So it's either starting in the city and going elsewhere, or starting elsewhere and ending within the city. So that actually lends itself well to the last question, because usually there's a fourth bucket that's just external. It's those pass-through trips that we're just completely excluding from this effort. The reason that we do this, again, is to understand a bit more nuance around the travel behavior and to understand what sort of activity is happening within the city itself versus influenced by neighboring jurisdictions. So it's really, once we have a good sense of the travel markets, we can start to really maximize the impact of the policies and strategies that we're choosing to reduce VMT. Any questions here? All right, I'll move quickly through some of these summary slides. And I guess maybe just a clarifying piece, because I didn't mention this earlier. We're ultimately going to be producing a report that details the results of all this travel market assessments and the results of all the strategy target setting evaluation that'll be incorporated into the GHG reduction sub-element as sort of a detailed appendix material. So you will have further opportunities to review this in a lot of detail. But again, we're presenting the travel market tonight as just sort of this overview to set the stage for what we're asking for feedback on for the reduction strategies. Okay, so what we're looking at here is daily vehicle trips by travel market. Again, these categories correspond to the ones I showed in the last slide here. And a couple of things stand out to me right off the top. Most of the trips happening within the city are actually starting and ending somewhere else. That's probably not that surprising to you all, given sort of the size of the city and the amount and type of land use within the city boundaries. But people are very frequently traveling across the boundary of the city to neighboring jurisdictions for a lot of purposes. Looking at the different types of travel markets here, you can see that work trips make up a pretty substantial amount of vehicle trips for the city. This proportion, I'll just note because it is slightly unique. Usually we see that work trips are about 20 to 25% of overall vehicle trips. And they're typically longer trips, right? Because people are more willing to commute longer distances than they are to, say, drive to the grocery store. So the work trips specifically are pretty heavy contributors to the overall VMT, which is why it's sort of important to recognize the scale and magnitude of the work trips in this category. Residents obviously make the most amount of trips within the city, which makes sense. They are the largest sort of population share across the different categories that we're looking at here. Any questions on this? Yeah.
2024, or is this
Oh, good question. This is 2023. All of the travel market analysis is done using 2023 data. All right, next slide. Okay, so obviously the other aspect of VMT is trip length. So this shows the average trip length by all of these different buckets here. You'll see that there's a lot of very short vehicle trips that are happening for Lake Forest Park. Again, people are traveling to a lot of neighboring jurisdictions, but they're also driving within the city to access goods and services. You'll see some sort of maybe surprising like upticks in some of these like later trip length buckets. That's kind of a funny quirk of the Seattle metro area where you'll see bumps corresponding to distances to downtown Seattle or Bellevue or Redmond, where all of the sort of key employment centers are. So that's sort of showing here in that like 5 to 10 mile range for Seattle, sort of 12 to 18 miles for some of the east side destinations. But this sort of distribution curve is pretty standard to what we see across a lot of other communities, maybe with slightly fewer of these pretty short vehicle trips.
Is this round trip or one-way trip distance?
This is one-way trip distance. Good question. Next slide. So we have some more specific slides here breaking out the different travel markets by that sort of internal, external categories here. I'll really quickly go through these, but again, just noting that those trips that are starting and ending somewhere else outside of the city for commute trips are disproportionately contributing to the overall VMT, since those are typically some of the longest trips that interact with the city itself. And again, from going back to that transportation profile slide, most people who live in Lake Forest Park are working elsewhere. And so the people who are actually working in the city are commuting in as well. So you're just getting a lot of that sort of cross-city commute trips in and out, which are obviously not ideal for trying to minimize the amount of VMT per capita. Next slide. Again, resident trips here, this is where we start to see there's more of these sort of short internal trips are attributed to residents. This is not that surprising. Again, residents are making a lot of shorter trips, thinking about, you're dropping your kid off at school and then you're going to the grocery store. Those types of trips add up pretty quick. But obviously they're the largest contribution to the overall VMT within the city. Last slide, next slide. And then visitor trips, it's not a huge travel market. But again, this is just really related to that sort of shopping, socialization, non-work type travel that people are coming to the city to experience. So those trips, again, are mostly internal, external. There's not too much internal travel within the city boundary itself for visitors.
Just clarification, this is all automobile travel, doesn't include bus travel or.
Correct. Yep, this is just vehicle travel.
Do you have a company, any information about visitors that come by bus, that kind of data, the transit oriented?
So we do. What I've done is I've pulled some of the mode share data from the travel demand model to correspond to this same sort of breakdown of like internal, external trips. The transit mode share is so low that it doesn't really mean much in the context of daily vehicle trips. So for context, we summarized the transit ridership across all of the bus stops within the city boundary, which is how we got to that like 50% reduction from 2019 to 2024. And the daily number of boardings in Lake Forest Park was around, I want to say it was like about 1,500 in 2019, and it's down to about 600 in 2024. So that's a much smaller sliver compared to the vehicle trips in the city.
So like at some point, the impact of light rail on getting to the airport or getting downtown, I think people are gonna like that. And you should see it sometime reflected in the data. And it would be nice to have a way to track that.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, our more detailed transit analysis has some more documentation around sort of travel time accessibility for these current years, and then like I mentioned for 2030 as well, since we know that there's some big changes coming. So we can certainly sort of flag that as something to go into more detail on.
For here, I wouldn't be surprised if that translates into a shift in shorter internal to external travel. That like, I know when I take the light rail, every time I've taken it, I've driven to the light rail.
Right.
Because I don't have a convenient bus to get me there without adding
But then
a half an hour into my trip.
going to the airport, you're not driving, so you're not doing that transit, right? You're not generating.
And last time I went to the airport, my husband dropped me off.
Yeah, maybe you're getting an Uber or something to the airport or to the light rail to go to the airport.
Yeah, so we still had the vehicle trip. It was just a 4-mile trip or a 3-mile trip or whatever instead of a
Right, but we're
20-mile
trying to
trip.
look at the total emissions associated with our travel.
Absolutely. I'm just saying it
Yeah.
won't necessarily translate to fewer trips, but you may see
That's what I'm
the
asking about.
chart of
Yeah.
length of trips,
Yeah.
we may see
But if we see
an
transit,
eventual change.
the transit data itself, we
Yeah.
can see that directly.
Great, yeah, great comments. I've noted this down as something to look more into. All right, next slide. All right, so I know that we went very quickly through that travel market assessment, but like I mentioned, this is really just trying to set the stage for what we're going to be diving into with the VMT reduction strategies. There will be more information that you can review once we've developed that sort of technical memorandum. So the sort of context here on connecting the dots is what we typically see sort of the planning process before sort of the climate element development and commerce requirements is that the climate action plan that communities do will choose a lot of great strategies, but they're kind of developed in a silo, right? They're developed without a lot of this background on how travel is happening and how people are willing to travel in the city. And so we can kind of use this context of the assessment to now sort of right size our strategies and choose ones that we know are effective in reducing VMT. So if you click through these, there's a couple of bullet points that I wanted to highlight here on what we're going to be using these travel market results for. So the first one is just sort of this review of the climate action plan strategies to understand their alignment with these new results. The results will also be used to quantify the expected VMT reduction from the climate action plan strategies, as this is a required step by Commerce. It'll be used to inform the VMT per capita reduction targets. The Commerce requirements specify that you must set both near and long-term VMT per capita targets. That obviously we don't want to choose something that's totally out of left field, because Commerce does require that jurisdictions are able to sort of track progress towards implementation and progress towards achieving that target. So we want to make sure that our targets are grounded in reality here. And then we know that the climate action plan has developed some great strategies, but we have developed some additional sort of strategies and policies to consider to help support ultimately what the VMT reduction targets will be and to support the travel market assessment. Any questions on that process? All right, next slide. So what VMT reduction strategies have already been adopted? So we looked at the climate action plan that was developed recently and there's a strategy to reduce community-wide driving. And so there's a lot of great things in here already, focusing on encouraging and focusing transit-oriented development, developing a pedestrian bicycle network, secure bike storage, a mobility hub at the town center, and then more of this sort of regional collaboration focus with some of the neighboring jurisdictions. So if you go to the next slide. What we wanted to do was understand how the reduction strategies from the climate action plan fit within the existing assessment. So the first piece that we wanted to highlight here is that 1 in every 5 trips in Lake Forest Park is less than 2 miles. Therefore, some of the strategies that really align with this is promoting active transportation, such as walking and biking, which are really well suited to reducing that 2 mile or less vehicle trip. I really liked that strategy on that regional micromobility focus because many of those short trips are either starting or ending somewhere else. That this sort of cross collaboration with the neighboring jurisdictions is going to be really important to facilitate both ends of that trip, just because there is so much travel in between. Another interesting piece similar to that regional collaboration is that over 80% of vehicle trips are starting or ending outside of the city. So some of the strategies around land use and focusing transit-oriented development will both shorten trip lengths, which is good for VMT, but also encouraging some of that shared mobility, enhancing transit and the active transportation strategies that have been developed. And then ultimately, strengthening all of these together is what's going to make car-free trips more feasible. So some of that focus on mobility hubs and the pedestrian bicycle connections to the town center. Something that we really emphasize in developing these strategies is that they can't be in a silo. The strategies are really interdependent on each other. And this is what makes sort of VMT analysis so fun and technical, is because they're very layered together in their efficacy. For example, if you're developing a really great mobility hub at the town center, it won't necessarily reduce vehicle trips or VMT if people can't get there without a car. So I think that's sort of what's been brought up already with some of the light rail access. That seems to resonate, where if you're not able to take a bus or bike or walk to a light rail station, you're going to drive a vehicle. And so what are some of those strategies that we can do to make sure that those multimodal trips are easily facilitated? So next slide, I wanted to just pause here and get a little bit of feedback from you on what has been done so far, or what hasn't been done on the strategy implementation from the climate action plan. The reason that I'm asking this question is our sort of next step that we're taking is we're going to take these climate action plan strategies and evaluate their effectiveness for VMT reduction based off of the travel markets. And so we want to understand if there's been, changes to any of the strategies that were proposed, if you're, really excited about making really good progress on any of them, or if there's some that, kind of thrown up your hands on, this is really difficult, we're not sure how to do this, so that we can make sure that we're appropriately evaluating the strategies as they're implemented in the city. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts that they want to share on this question.
We really only had one strategy, and that was hire a climate manager. We found a funding source, and they took the funding source and paid the deficit down. So there is a commitment, but not for votes yet, to hire a climate manager in 2025. Because we think that it requires somebody who is paying attention every day, all the time, to moving these issues. We do have a climate team who's doing, we decided this year we're just gonna do outreach so that people don't forget that climate is an issue in this environment. But it's not sustainable long-term, what we're doing this year.
I think actually implementation requires that what you're doing happen and that this become part of the strategic plan, this next process. And that then things become more implementable because they're more policy oriented.
So in reality, then there's not a whole lot of progress other than.
Well, they bought battery operated tools for them. And the chief is looking at an EV, I don't know that he's buying one, but he's looking at it. I mean, I think we've raised the issue in a way that people are. I think what we haven't done is we haven't raised the issue from the community, which is inside.
Because it seems to me that I think that's the key to. I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of changes.
Yeah.
It may be that an individual cannot be hired for that position. I mean, if that could be the worst case scenario, right? So what's the alternative that can be done? And I think it's reaching out to community to educate the community, and then asking questions. Then, what's that implementation plan for the community? I'm just thinking of worst case scenarios, given the climate.
The thing is that this is so I'm saying what everybody knows. If you don't pay attention 100% of the time in the next 4 years, we're going to be 10 years behind because it piles on top of each other. And the climate manager has the possibility of integrating from department to department so that in every area it pushes forward. I mean, the only good thing about all this stuff is there are going to be some great people on it. I mean, it's terrible to say, but I think it's the truth. But we have the opportunity to do something. When there's attention.
Climate action plans are notorious for not being implemented, for being written and not implemented. And so having it become part of the comp plan is a way of creating policy that then is based on the climate action. And so that's something. And then we can do education, but we don't have the authority as a committee to say, you need to put, these sidewalks have to happen, or let's make those bikes that stop at the border between Seattle and Lake Forest. But all those electric bikes that stop and are parked because you can't bring them into here, or you cannot drive them. I mean, there's things like that should change, but there's really only so much the committee of volunteers make happen. So that's why we're pushing for the person that's part of the city.
Yeah, I totally get that. I totally get the purpose of doing that.
Yeah. but hopefully this process will make a lot of it happen.
But back to your question, how has there been any, or has there been any progress in strategy implementation? If we were to say no, I mean, yes and no, Marissa, is that helpful?
That is helpful. Yes, I think getting any of this context is always helpful. And I think the policy focus is really important here. So I'm glad that you guys see the comprehensive plan sort of update process as this vehicle towards making progress on implementation. And that's certainly something that we're going to be working with Cascadia on, so that we ensure that all the policies and strategies we develop are like fully integrated into the climate element itself. In the interest of time, I think we'll keep moving. So I wanted to cover just some additional best practices, other VMT reduction strategies that we may consider as a part of this process. So the context around this, just to sort of reiterate what our next steps are, our quantification, our analysis of VMT reduction strategies is going to focus on the ones that are in the climate action plan, just given that these are what are adopted already. This is what the city has sort of previously committed to focus on. However, there will be sort of this remaining gap that's of VMT reduction required to meet the per capita reduction targets. And so what we want to do is choose really effective additional strategies to support meeting that target. We don't necessarily need to go through the effort of figuring out, what % they contribute. And so what we're asking, the kind of feedback that I'm asking for tonight is really to get everyone thinking about these additional strategies and to start thinking about if there's specific elements of them or totally different strategies in general that you would like to have considered as a part of this process. So there's a lot of text on these slides. I won't go into all this detail since we are leaving with the slide deck, and we'll provide a bit of time for some written feedback after this meeting. But we've structured out these slides in a way that the first piece is just building on what you have in the climate action plan already. And just some additional policies and strategies that can support what's been laid out with the climate action plan itself. So the first one, again, is focusing on that multimodal transportation infrastructure. The climate action plan specifies that sort of bike network. But one of the things that we always want to emphasize is that this network needs to be in all ages and abilities, what we call spine network, which means that you don't need to build out a facility on every single street in the city. But the focus should be connecting very key origins and destinations across the city with an all ages and abilities network. And what this means is facility types like shared use paths and wide sidewalks and vertically separated bike lanes to facilitate travel by all ages and abilities. One of the surprising stats that I'll throw out is that from the PSRC household travel survey, about 10 to 15% of daily travel is kid related. It's that school pickup and drop off. It's taking them to soccer practice and to their friend's house. And if you aren't safely able to take your kid with you on your bike or on your, walking to school, that's going to immediately default to a vehicle trip in a lot of scenarios. So emphasizing this all ages and abilities network is really important. There's been a lot of work previously done by the city to identify pretty specific projects to improve access to the town center, which again, building out that multimodal connection, if it is going to be this mobility hub focus, how do we make sure that people can access it safely? There's, again, kind of skipping through some of these, transit-oriented development. There's a lot of strategies that you can do here. And I know that the housing element has made a lot of progress on detailing a lot of these policies. But the more transit-oriented development that can occur in more of these denser areas of the city is going to go a very long way in supporting VMT per capita reduction. Next slide. Additional recommendations. So we want to separate up a couple of these by sort of what's able to be done by the city versus what needs to be more of a regional focus. So specifically wanted to mention sort of missing commercial development sort of separately from that transit-oriented, maybe more middle housing, affordable housing type development. Again, just sort of recognizing what the travel market was showing with the inflows and outflows of employee commute trips. Many of the current jobs are not serving the current population of Lake Forest Park, as well as what we were seeing with a lot of that internal, external travel by residents is that people are traveling to a lot of nearby jurisdictions for very general types of, again, shopping, retail, food type trips. And if there was a greater variety of those types of land uses within the city, people again would be able to take shorter trips to get there. Maybe it would be multimodal. Again, just encouraging these layering opportunities to build on the VMT strategies. Safe Routes to School program, I think fits in really well with a lot of the city's goals in making sure that walking and biking to schools is something that is safe and available to everyone within the city. Next slide. Again, like I mentioned, there's a lot of strategies related to implementing the housing goals and the housing element. But one thing I didn't see specifically mentioned was anything about reducing the parking requirements or parking minimums. And this is a pretty high priority strategy that can reduce development costs and improve housing affordability, as well as encouraging more of the sustainable transportation choices. Next slide.
Good question.
Isn't that happening in the state, the reduction of parking, state legislation?
Hopefully soon. The legislation, yeah, has a lot of ongoing parking related requirements, but the city can obviously take its own steps before any sort of state legislation takes place.
Which we may know more once legislative session ends shortly here, so.
Yeah, hopefully soon. I think it's next slide. Yeah, here. Okay. So there's a lot of sort of these regional pieces. Again, going back to the climate action plan strategy and some of that more neighboring jurisdiction collaboration, I think is really important to facilitate that multimodal travel and make sure that the cities are collaborating on that. One thing that I think we can maybe get into a little bit more on transit is that King County Metro is going to be updating Metro Connects, their long range plan, later this year in 2026-ish. And so what I've been communicating to cities is that this is a great time to develop those priorities to be able to communicate with Metro on what sort of changes you'd like to see to the long range plan. And so if we identify policies that are focused on improving access to light rail, that's something that could be included in this VMT study. And then once it's integrated into the comp plan, adopted, a really great piece of material to be able to coordinate with Metro on. So if we can certainly talk about that in more detail if you'd like. And then there's, again, going back to some of the previous work that's been done by the city. I know that WashDOT has worked on that sort of safe highway projects. Again, facilitating more of that multimodal safe access to the town center to prioritize implementing those projects. And then at the regional level, there's a statewide road usage charge. PSRC assumes this as a part of their VMT modeling. They assume it's in place by 2050. And so it's something that we're encouraging jurisdictions to start to consider and decide whether or not you'd like to include that as a policy to continue coordinating and collaborating with PSRC on advocating for that statewide. Although again, that may be something that just comes from the legislature at some point. And then next slide, we can, again, you will have time to provide written feedback on these questions. I know that we're running short on time here, but just to get some sort of initial feels from the group, if any of these additional strategies resonate really well with you, is there anything that we've missed? And has anyone discussed anything about VMT reduction targets?
Can I ask a clarifying question on slide 37? One of the recommendations was around housing and increasing affordable housing to allow employees who work in LFP to live locally. My recollection on the breakdown for work-related trips is that we don't have in this a breakdown of people commuting internal to external versus external to internal. Is that correct? It's all one lumped together?
It's lumped together in the slides, but we do have that separated in our analysis.
Okay. My guess would be we have a lot more people starting here and leaving the city for work trips than vice versa.
Yes.
So I'm curious, people are working in Lake Forest Park but not living in Lake Forest Park, and whether housing would actually have any impact on that number.
Maybe school teachers. Is the
Yeah.
biggest employer, right? True.
Would assume so. Yeah.
So, our school teachers, right? Apparently.
Yeah.
And firefighters, I guess that's the other category.
And how many firefighters do we have in the city? We can't have that many.
Oh,
Shrub and fire.
fire, firehouse.
Yeah.
Police, and, yeah.
Police, yeah.
And municipal people.
Someone has their hand raised.
Okay, Yane, I see your hand up. Go ahead. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, I hit the button twice. Sorry about that. One of the things I struggle with these recommendations, like encouraging frequent transit access to nearby communities, is that we don't even have good transit to the light rail stations that just opened. So there's this kind of disconnect, like we built and paid for rail, and the bus connections for us in Lake Forest Park actually got worse. They eliminated some routes, and now what people used to take 522 downtown, now it dumps them off at Ravenna, but there's no connection to the Shoreline station. Even the Mountain Lake Terrace station would be better. I just feel like there's a real disconnect between, or there's a complete lack of like local, quick, frequent access to connect population centers like the town center to light rail. And, you know, like I heard someone say, they always drive to light rail. And you would do that even if you lived at, you know, right by town center, because there's no bus that's going to get you there quickly. So it's a pretty frustrating disconnect that Lake Forest Park itself has been kind of almost like removed from this new network, where the only thing you can do is drive, and those parking lots are full by 8:15 in the morning, so you can't really do it midday. So I'd like to see us, you know, elevate the need for giving Lake Forest Park residents like reliable, frequent access to even just get to rail. We don't have it.
The Metroplex is in the south part of the city, but north part of the city above Ballinger. And there's talk about extending that, right, where you call a bus that, but that's still a vehicle travel, it's just not your vehicle. Does that count? When you're in the Metroplex, are you by yourself?
No idea. Haven't used it.
Yeah, I'm the wrong part of that.
Okay, yeah, this is really helpful. And again, yeah, any policies, priorities the city decides around trans access, you guys have great timing right now in developing this in advance of the Metro Connects update. Because Metro will be starting to coordinate with all the cities likely next year on this.
Oh, I'm just gonna say the obvious stuff. I ride my bicycle, but there are places I won't ride because I think I'll die. You know, when you get on the Burke-Gilman Trail, you can't actually get up to Kenmore on the entrance on 68 unless you push your bike down.
Or going down.
65 pounds up that really hill. So I mean, there they're just, and some of the places, and you know, I had a child in school 25 years ago, and I'd say, same stuff. They couldn't ride their bicycle because it was too dangerous. Wouldn't have considered letting my child ride a bicycle to the elementary school. But it sounds like, and it's the same thing. I didn't ride my bicycle to the elementary school. So it's sort of, the question for me is, how do you move from policy to implementation? How do you, and in times when resources are going to be scarce, or issue of implementation is the critical piece of it. And anything that gets us moving towards implementation is valuable strategy.
That's helpful. And we put maybe a bullet or so in the slides, but something that we can add a bit more detail to the report on is some of those funding strategies. Obviously, we know right now just how uncertain grant funding is, but there are other funding strategies that I know the city has historically had some challenges with voter approved increases in any taxes, but there are alternative methods that do not require voter approval. The city could consider to secure additional funding and then hopefully potentially find additional grant sources. So that's something that we will certainly consider in the recommendations and want to provide more guidance on our report.
Marissa, can I ask a quick question? I should have asked this earlier, but how are you guys considering or taking into account Lyft and Uber and taxi rides?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not inherently called out in the analysis, but would likely just be bundled under that visitor category, since it's not a resident or employee of the city.
But it kind of reduces resident rides, right? Like people were saying they ride to the light or they drive to the light rail. I have taken an Uber to the light rail before, and it's then sort of reduced a ride that I would have otherwise taken from my house.
But it's still a vehicle trip that's happening, I guess. So there's multiple different ways to look at VMT, whether it's attributed to the household, whereas an Uber Lyft trip would not necessarily be household generated. But in the context of what we're looking at with this total VMT perspective, it is a vehicle trip that's occurring.
Yeah, got it.
One of the strategies I do really like is the idea of micromobility centers.
With those words, what do you think they are?
Like a business in your community, like
Yeah, like
a
local
little store.
104, like
Yeah,
the pizza
exactly.
place, like they put the little coffee shop there, so it's kind of like a little micro congregation area, I think. Wouldn't you call that an example?
Exactly, as an example, yeah.
I've always wanted something a little bit more than just the town center, but I don't know where you would put it.
It's what I really used to like about areas like Ballinger, right? Excuse me, not Ballinger, but Ballard and Fremont. That, you know, there were towns within town.
Yeah.
Right. That would be an incentive for me to walk someplace close versus.
It is?
Oh my
What's
God.
up?
Oh, it's just like the coffee place that was at local 104 is up by the light rail now.
Oh.
So now you have to drive to get there.
Yeah.
Which makes
So-
sense for them, but
Yeah.
now you would have to drive there.
They moved into the new
Yeah.
terrace
And
station.
so I would ask, like, you know, what about economic incentives that would encourage, which parallels well with our middle housing piece. It's the more opportunity there is for diverse kinds of housing, maybe there's an opportunity for micro centers.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I will maybe give a little preview. We've been doing a pretty big project with Shoreline for their sort of mobility hub evaluation. They're trying to do a similar effort around a lot of their light rail stations, but then at other areas of the city. And they've developed this really cool sort of planning guide detailing different types of mobility centers. And I really like the focus on economic incentives. So we can follow up. That information is going to be public beginning of April. So that's something that we could probably share in advance of the next CPAP meeting for you guys to look at.
Yeah, the other thing I think seems to be important is the collaboration. The east side cities have 5 east side cities. And the notion that we could connect Woodinville, Bothell, Kenmore, Lake Forest Park and Shoreline in initiatives that reduce costs, because instead of, like 13,000 people, we had a pool of 200,000 people. So I think that notion of collaboration with the 5 north end cities, and maybe in addition, it's only terrace.
I want to read more of that.
Yeah.
Well, so speaking, then thinking about what Jan is saying about Lake Forest Park kind of being lost in the process of, that there's Bothell, that's an amazing place now, right? And then there's Lake Forest Park that's just kind of people just drive. So like, how do we connect? How does right? How do we have Lake Forest Park be a hub again, or a place where people stop, and that it is part of the bigger northern community? That makes sense. Because the more we can.
Right, the more we can keep people here doing things they would otherwise travel
Exactly.
outside of the city for, like coffee,
Like coffee.
ice cream.
Wow.
All right, well, this is all super great feedback. So thank you all. If you just go to the next slide, Alexandra, I'll just wrap up my piece really quick on next steps. So like I mentioned, we are going to just hold sort of the next week or so. If you do have additional comments or feedback or thoughts to share, please feel free to email both Alexandra and myself with those. We'll be accepting comments on this until next Wednesday, the 19th. And we'll be coming back during the April meeting to share more on that expected quantification of VMT reduction from those climate action plan strategies. We're also hoping to meet with PSRC over the next month to discuss their input on the VMT per capita target setting. So we'll be coming back in April with more results to share, but also more opportunities for you to provide feedback on where this ultimately goes. Any final questions?
Good information.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. It helps structure kind of how to think about like transit and stuff within the city and what's important. So yeah, it's awesome. Thank you.
Great, yeah, thanks for sticking with me for a long technical presentation on a Wednesday evening.
Thanks for being here, Marissa. We really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll look forward to having you back in April. Okay. David, if it's okay with you, I'll move us to our next agenda item. Okay, I think I saw a head nod. Okay, great. Thanks, Marissa. Have a good rest of your evening. Okay, y'all. So moving into the section of our agenda on old business, I want to spend kind of the bulk of our time talking through a number of engagement updates, getting some input from y'all, and yes, I think we can scale as appropriately and spend time where it seems most appropriate to you all. So first up on the list is that you may have seen through the Lake Forest Park email blast that the survey has launched. So it's officially open. I didn't update this slide here. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, which is very exciting. And the survey has been translated into Spanish. And the postcard direct mailers are in the process of being sent to Lake Forest Park residents. I think in total, it's about 4,200 addresses, and folks will receive those. And I've got a little snapshot of what those look like momentarily here. And then we also have a survey link that if you don't have access, I'll make sure you do as part of our follow-up items in case you want to share that with any of your networks. So just for your context, this is what the postcard looks like. I don't have any commentary here. Does anyone have any questions about the survey?
I have two questions. One, you said you got the email today.
I got an email.
Do
about this.
you
I didn't
know
click
what
on it,
list
so
it went out to, or do you happen to know what list it went out to?
I was gonna ask that.
I don't see it in my inbox, and I thought I had gotten myself onto the
Yeah.
city list.
Yeah, it must not be the city list because I didn't get it.
It's Lake Forest Park News.
Oh,
Which I usually get.
Yeah, that's what I have and I got it. So
Interesting.
that's the general. one.
Either it went
All
somewhere else in
notices.
my inbox, but it usually doesn't.
I've been getting weird things dumped into,
Yeah, okay,
yeah.
I'll hunt for it.
And we'll keep doing it. Maybe all lists.
The other question I had was, is this the only collateral piece that you've created, or is there any kind of flyer or handout or anything that can either be posted in general, like in the town center, in the commons, and at the Green Fair? It would be great. I'm guessing you guys are gonna have a table as well. We will have multiple tables represented there if we want either handouts or a like scan QR code type thing.
Yeah.
If you have materials, we would love to have them, or I would love to have them.
Great. Victoria, yes, we do have a fact sheet, and I have that on the next slide. Maybe before we get to the fact sheet and those tabling opportunities, does anyone else have questions about the survey? Aside from like distribution and tabling.
This is like, each household gets one, is that right?
No, anyone
Yeah.
can take it. You can
Yes.
identify. If a household with 6, you can take 6 of them.
How does that, so I was looking at this postcard, what? How do I,
It's not limited to house.
oh,
It's a by email.
Yeah.
By you.
I'm not an IT person, but your IP address, you take it and that's it.
Yep.
So if 6 of you use the same one, that might be a conflict, but that's rare.
and you'll all be on your own phones doing it, so.
phones, okay.
Yeah.
And you can get around the IP address. Like, let's say, for example, you have one shared computer, you can use like an incognito window and just.
If you.
Oh.
It turns out, yeah.
Figure out how to game this system.
Take it 20 times.
So
We're
I'm
not
trying,
counting.
I'm trying to figure out what we would tell people at the at tabling. These are not, so these are, just, is this a unique thing? No.
That gets you to the survey where what you log on with it.
So people come to our table,
Yeah.
what do we say to them?
Take the survey.
Take the survey.
Yeah, they can scan that thing, right?
They can scan right
Get
there.
them to the
Do we-
survey.
Do we know when the postcards are planned to drop?
They were supposed to be shipped today, so they should be arriving in the next couple of days. They're shipped locally, so
And when does it close again?
April 10th.
April 10th.
When is that?
Green Fair is the 29th. So the message at Green Fair can be, did you see a postcard like this? If you haven't taken it yet, scan the QR code here on our table. Take the survey right now. Yeah.
Yeah, literally, it's just take it right there.
Right now,
Yeah.
You're taking the survey.
do you have extra of the
Show me
postcards?
confirmation, get a sticker.
We don't. They are being printed and shipped directly from the printer. But I will say that we can probably very easily make a address-free version if you wanted to like.
You have like a copy of something. You said you have something on the next slide that we can have at the table. Does that include a QR to the survey?
It does not. So but I think what we could do, let me just make a note to myself before I forget here.
There's
Is
a QR on the thing and that.
Eyes are
It's
bad.
the project
But that's
website,
the-
it's not the
yeah.
survey.
So if we have either a quarter page or a page flyer or handout or something specific to the survey, we can either hand it out or post it at our tables. In addition to the fact sheet.
great. Possible quarter page with survey QR code to send. Or printed copies.
And if that's a like flyer, a flyer version of the postcard, we can also post it, like I said, for the next month on the community bulletin board. As well as having it at our tables on the 29th.
Yeah. So what I'm showing on the screen here is a fact sheet that's more broadly about the climate element. And so I think what our hope was is that we would make something that's like slightly longer lasting than just the duration of the survey. And so this could be used for multiple engagement touch points or for any community events that are happening that you all might want to bring a fact sheet like this to. So I did send a PDF version like around 5 p.m. today, in case you all want to review this a little bit more closely. I'm assuming you can't read the text on the screen here. And so no worries there, but I would say if you have any edits to this fact sheet, it's still in draft form. So we're seeking CPAT and city input on this content, ideally by March 21st. And then Victoria, to your point about Victoria, so I see your hand, maybe 1 second. Victoria, to your point about potentially bringing a fact sheet to the upcoming Green Fair, other events, I think like this could be something that you all bring forward, or who knows, however it makes the most sense to use this type of information.
It would be great to have copies of this, if y'all can print us when it's finalized, to stick in the material box for both the Green Fair and the Arbor Day event.
Yeah, pretty much,
Yeah.
these are great for reference when we're talking to people, wherever we are, your list of events for climate action committee. Just so that I don't forget to tell you that I see a typo.
Wow,
Be a part of planning for the future.
for sure.
Yeah. Sorry, I have an editor.
Great catch. Honestly, it takes a village, and I looked at this a lot and didn't see that. So thanks, Mimi.
That's my motto.
What was your motto? Sorry.
Everybody needs an editor. Everybody needs somebody else's eyes on their printed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I like how it's formatted.
Yeah.
It looks easy to read. I can't wait for it.
Great. Yeah, and then maybe just to give you like a little tour of what we were thinking here is we tried to be broad enough about the project that folks would understand. Like, one, we referenced the Climate Action Committee and Climate Action Plan, which I think are key touch points, and we wanted to just give a nod to y'all and the great work you've done so far. Well, here, let me use my screen. This blue section down at the bottom is speaking a bit to why this is important and what climate impacts are expected or already being experienced in Lake Forest Park. At the top, this is like generically essentially what the climate element is intended to do and what climate policy and policy that's included in the comprehensive plan is intended to do. And then this is the QR code that will take the reader to the webpage, excuse me. And then we put a quick overview of what the key touch points are. So the community survey, which closes April 10th, open house, which is being planned for May, and then the public comment period, which will occur in the summer. And then that's also reiterated at the bottom here on this timeline.
You said it's a draft, but your QR code goes to the city of Walla Walla, just FYI.
Thank you. You can tell we're working for a couple jurisdictions. Okay, good flag. So if you guys want to participate in the city of Walla Walla survey, their survey is a couple weeks behind yours.
I assume, is the survey already linked on our page? Or will it be soon?
We didn't try the QR code today. That's a good question.
Let's see.
QR code was tested.
I assume they're on our city webpage for the
the
climate
project
element,
page,
the
yeah.
project page. There'll be just a link. It doesn't need to be a QR code once you're on there. but
Exactly,
A link
yeah.
on there to the survey, yeah,
Yeah. Right
It's
there.
right on top.
perfect.
Yeah.
That's what I was actually trying to track
That
when I
scared me
scanned the
because
QR
the
code.
postcard arrives starting tomorrow and they're gonna be taking the Walla Walla.
I mean, let's see, I can go back and scan that one.
Okay.
And in the,
I'll sleep better knowing that,
give me one sec.
otherwise I have to call 4,200 people.
Yeah, no kidding.
Tell them just use the link. Is there
Yeah.
a link on the postcard too? There must be.
Yeah.
Here, do we want to scan it? Now I need to know.
So we have about 20 minutes remaining of our meeting, so.
Great. We're right on time, I think, David.
Just in case.
I didn't try the bit.ly link under it, but the QR code works.
Okay. Yeah, it takes us to Lake Forest Park on the postcard. Okay, great.
Those
Okay.
little things like.
Exactly, it's the little things. Okay, y'all. So I think the question that I had for you on the fact sheet front is yeah, please just continue to send us those like editorial things that you find, any typos. I've flagged the two. Mimi, that typo that you just flagged, and I obviously flagged that the QR code is incorrect. So those two have been noted, but if there are additional items, please let us know. And if feel free to make comments in the PDF, or you can send us emailed comments, whatever works best for you. And then I flagged that once we get this finalized, we'll work with the city to make sure that you all have some printed copies of this fact sheet for those upcoming events. And then speaking of events, this came up in our conversation with David and Anne as we were preparing for tonight's meeting, but Anne had put forward these key dates of upcoming community events. So the annual Green Fair on March 29th, the Climate Hub event on April 22nd, and then a potentially collaborative event with Kenmore about wildfires on May 3rd. And I wanted to just see if there are other events that you all are aware of that are happening in the city that you want us to make sure we're tracking or supporting, in providing materials. As far as Cascadia's attendance to these events, we do have capacity to attend one and potentially have a bit more of like an interactive, tabling activity where folks could provide some input in real time. So I'd love to just get y'all's input on what event might be most appropriate for that.
We have, we're collaborating with Kenmore on something called Solarize Kenmore. Where Lake Forest Park people are invited. We think the Climate Hub is opening on the 22nd of April. It's a dream. We're gonna walk in Horizon View Park with the tree committee.
Tree board and
Tree
Parks
board
Board.
and the Parks Board on the 27th of April. We're doing something I call Get Ready for Fire Season on May 3rd.
April 27th is the Arbor Day event, just FYI.
Another Solarize Kenmore, we're doing, we're celebrating Octavia Butler. There's a garden tour on June 14th.
I never get it.
Picnic in the park, September 6th.
After the meeting.
We're at the farmer's market, but we don't have a date in this time. And I have a thing I'll send you.
So Alexandra, though, you're saying that you could potentially be at one of these events. So
Yeah,
the question is, which event do we think that would be most opportunistic for you to be at?
And what would you do there?
We are tentatively, so I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but we're tentatively thinking that we could use that as a community touch point and have two key questions as like mini whiteboards and ask people to like write on a Post-it, stick it on our whiteboard, engage with them, hand out flyers, with the fact sheets, and talk a bit about the climate element process.
Zoom Green Fair is where you would get the best exposure.
It's well known.
Yeah.
of all
Green
interest.
Fair.
Well,
Our Arbor Day event last year had, I think, 3 attendees
Yeah,
who weren't
yeah,
on the
so-
tree board.
Yeah.
so, yeah, I agree with the Green Fair would be.
And we all have tables, so you can sit at our tables, right?
I'm gonna guess that they could also
Have their own.
get, yeah. I don't know who's coordinating tables, is it Corey?
And Jan, I see your hand up as well. Did you have additional thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going backwards though a little bit. I just had one comment on the fact sheet. Sorry, I was kind of scanning it as we shifted topics. So in the very first part, I would actually take that last paragraph, building on the 2024 climate action plan, and I would make that the first paragraph because I think it answers the question and then the rest explains it. So basically saying we're building off climate action plan, climate element does X, Y, Z. And then for those people who want to read about how it relates to the comp plan can read that. But it's kind of getting the actual answer to what is a climate element up in front instead of at the very end.
Got it.
So consider it. I'm not saying, that's definitely right, but I would ask you to just take a look at that. The flow right now, you kind of have to read through a couple of paragraphs before you really get what this latest effort is. So
Okay, thanks, Yane. Good flag. Okay. Great. Keep those edits coming. Yeah, go ahead, Victoria.
Oh, they're keys. Oh, interesting. Oh, no, we're having a side conversation. We're good.
Okay, y'all. No worries. Okay, well, great. So good to know about this Green Fair as potentially being the best event for us to attend. I'll potentially follow up with y'all about how we might get a table and potentially making that happen in the next couple of weeks here. Anything else on the survey, the fact sheet, or these potential upcoming engagement touch points?
I think we're good.
Okay, great. And then I just wanted to share a quick update. We talked about this at our last CPAT meeting on the group interviews, but we sent invitations to these 4 folks. So the Interact Club, the Lake Forest Park Stewardship Foundation, and the Third Place Commons, specifically seeking business owner connection, and the Shoreline Lake Forest Park Senior Center. So we are hoping folks will reply soon and we'll get meetings scheduled, and we'll keep you updated as we learn more. But just wanted to thank you for your input and direction on making those connections happen. And then I don't have a slide for this, but I just want to share that we are starting to think through the timing and logistics for an open house that would occur likely in late May. And we'll be bringing updates on that in our April CPAT meeting. Any other questions or thoughts on engagement that we haven't talked about so far?
You have a press release? I mean, we could send to the Shoreline Area News or just sort of.
For the survey?
Yeah.
Mark, do we have a press release for the survey other than the announcement we sent to you?
No, we do not.
Okay. We can work on that.
Oh, yeah. Wow, thank you. That was the hard part.
Yeah.
Sending it to him is the easy part.
Could you speak high level on what these interviews will entail?
Yes. So the group interviews, the intent of the group interviews is to hear a bit more directly from specific audiences on essentially like for example, let's take the youth group through this Interact Club. We'd like to hear a bit more specifically about what those students' vision is for a climate resilient Lake Forest Park. And the goal is to have more of an open-ended discussion around a vision for the future, and then use that as to help inform like, okay, as we're developing climate policy, like where can this be underscored that, okay, this came up in several interviews that, you know, to the discussion we were just having with Marissa about economic incentives for like those micro, what was Marissa calling them? Micromodal, like micro centers.
Yes.
Anybody? You know, yeah. Well, clearly I'm not as fluent in that as Marissa, but essentially we can build from those group interviews as we develop policy. So the policy is being developed separately, but we want to make sure that we're grounding that in reality for what community members actually want to see. Does that answer your question, David?
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
It'd be interesting to compare the results of those conversations.
Yeah, I'll keep you posted. Okay, great. And then lastly, I think recognizing we're quickly approaching the end of our time together, I just wanted to review our action items. So following our last meeting, you all shared additional insights on the group interviews. You provided input on the draft survey. So thank you very much for that time and attention. That was really helpful for us to get those things across the finish line. And then we developed the draft fact sheet. This item, where's my cursor here? This item here, these two items here are ongoing, so ensuring our language is clear and specific, doing our best to minimize jargon and tailor products to Lake Forest Park context, and then sending those follow-up emails to you all with a roundup of action items. I'll be doing that in the next couple of days here, recognizing we've got a couple action items for you by mid next week. And then on the project team side, following our February meeting, we have been working to follow up on the data sources that you all recommended during our CPAT meeting in February, and continuing to build out the vulnerability assessment. And then we revise the survey based on your input. And then I just wanted to note a couple of items that I've captured from tonight's conversation. And I'll send these an email as well. So CPAT members and city staff, please send any additional comments on the VMT strategies to Marissa and myself, ideally by March 19th. And that material is provided to you in the slides and in the meeting packet. And then if you have any additional input on the fact sheet, if you can send that by next Friday, the 21st. And then on the project team side, we'll be sharing, we'll share the survey link with you all, make sure that you have easy access to that. We'll also put together a simple like quarter page with the survey QR code so that you can bring that to the Green Fair. And we'll work with the city on a press release for the survey. And then we'll be looking ahead a bit further. We'll be sharing the greenhouse gas summary memo with you all when that's available in the next month or so. And then on the city side, and I think Mark, you and I can work on coordinating who prints these, but just making sure we print copies of the fact sheet for CPAT members to bring to the Green Fair and distribute throughout Lake Forest Park. If we end up coming, if Cascadia ends up coming to the Green Fair, we can potentially print those and bring them.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other action items I missed that you all want to make sure I capture in my notes?
That's everything I have on that I collected from our conversations.
Awesome.
I think maybe just to confirm that you would have a table or something available at the Green Fair. I think that's something that Corey would.
Yeah, Corey in my department does that, so I'm gonna talk with her, she'll call you and she'll probably ask for an email of who you're sending.
Okay. Great, thanks, Mark.
She'll know about which tables and sharing and who has what, so I'm gonna leave that to her.
Yeah,
We all have
All
our tables.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I think I just got an email from her the other day about
Yeah.
our table, and I think Drew had said that we're going to be right next to the city table. I wouldn't be surprised if you were on the other side as the city table.
Excellent.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Okay, y'all. And then in the last couple minutes, just a reminder of where we are in our time together here. We'll be meeting again in April on Tuesday, the 15th. And that will be a really, I just wanted to caveat as we move into April and May, those two CPAT meetings will likely be really robust, and we're starting to put the pieces of the puzzle together. So in April, we'll be having an update with Marissa on the VMT reduction strategies, likely a quick touch point on the findings from the GHG summary memo, an update on the wedge, and then an update and discussion with the vulnerability assessment team on the exposure and sensitivity ratings. And we'll be starting to look towards the draft goals and policies. And then the goals and policies will be the focus of the May meeting. So just wanted to just note that we're like really building a lot of momentum, and I feel like these next couple months are going to fly by. But I'm really looking forward to it and grateful for y'all's commitment and attention, and yeah, just a lot of appreciation. So I think with that, I'll turn it back over to you, David.
Add one thing, the timeline for CPAT does not stop June 2nd. But to provide that for an update, so it is a temporary task force this year. In June, for the Commerce grant, I have to give deliverables for their fiscal year, and that could be the draft. But the Cascadia contract and the city review continues as long as we need it into the fall and winter. So at some point, we will transition to Planning Commission, then City Council, opportunities for CPAT to discuss, respond, answer questions, and then it's in the hands of City Council as a comprehensive plan amendment. And then at that point, the CPAT ceases to work. That's the outlook, the expected outlook.
And when is the time, what's your best guess of the timeline for the council?
I'm fine with December because that's when the Cascadia contract ends.
And are you thinking that at some point in the next few months, we will schedule set meetings for this group past June? Or are you thinking it will be we would contact you as needed and send up a bat signal?
Well, I've been an optimist, but now it's fast approaching, so probably will be some amount of certainty.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
maybe Mark, I'll just put a plug that I'll follow up with you directly about the kind of availability of consultant support for meetings between June and December.
Perfect, thank you.
So final question. So April 15th being the next meeting, is there any conflict for anyone attending? Yanni, can you attend?
Sorry about that. Can you restate the, which, are we talking about the next one?
April 15th.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you, Alexandra. This has been great. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, Everyone in agreement? Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. Take care.